Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Home Safari here at the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden. My name is Eddie, and I'm an animal trainer at the Emeritus Wings of Wonder bird encounter that we normally would have in the summer. And this right here is one of the stars of our summer encounter. This is Terri, and we took it the Home Safari inside, which is probably where all of you are today on a rainy day. So Terri is a Rhinoceros Hornbill. You can see where they get their name from that interesting thing on top of her beak. It's called a casque, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Rhinoceros hornbills are found in Southeast Asia, so the islands of Borneo, Sumatra, Java, and Malaysia is where they be found in rainforests. Up in the canopy of the rainforest is where they live. So Terri here, she is 24 years old. And the reason that she's in the bird encounter, a funny story, every animal here at the zoo has a story. And Terri's story is that when she came here to the Cincinnati Zoo, she was brought to be in our breeding program. We actually currently have 2 breeding pairs over in the birdhouse, and we wanted to integrate her into our breeding program, but what we found out is that Terri is much more comfortable around people than she is around other hornbills. She's what we would call an imprint. So imprinted birds are more comfortable. It all depends on how they're raised, and Terri was raised around with human care. So she's more comfortable around people, which makes her a great ambassador, but maybe not the best breeder. She didn't get along with the male at the time, so we decided maybe her job will be a great ambassador. And she's done a really outstanding job for us in the summer in our encounters. So that thing on top of her head that everybody's probably wondering about, how she got her name, a Rhinoceros Hornbill. It looks like it's a horn. It's actually called a casque, and it's made out of keratin on Terri. Now, different types of hornbills, there's over 50 different species of hornbills. They all live throughout Africa and Asia. And the casques are made, some of them are actually made of bone in certain species, but with Terri, it's made out of keratin, which is what her beak is made out of. It's actually the same protein your fingernails are made out of, and it's hollow inside. So when Terri calls, a casque on top of her head acts like a sound chamber, and it helps her call resonate through the dense rainforest. Because if you live in the rainforest and you want to communicate to a mate or to siblings, you want to be loud to make sure that your call carries throughout all the foliage. The same reason why parrots are really loud, because they most often live in rainforests, and to be heard, it pays to be loud if that's how you're going to communicate, so that's what that casque is for. Now the color is actually more, if you look at the end of Terri's beak, how it's a cream color, that's actually what the color is, but there's a gland on the base of her tail that emits orangey wax, and birds have more neck bones than we do, so even though her neck is kind of curled up in an S right now, she can extend it. She has 14 neck bones. We only have 7. So with that extra flexible neck, she can actually bend back around and wipe that oil on her casque and give it that color. Also, it pays to have at least some part of your body brightly colored when you're living in the dense rainforest, so you can see each other. Now, we know Terri is a girl because of the color of her eyes and because of her size. We don't have a male to compare the size. Males are generally a little bit larger. But it's a dead giveaway, her eye color. It's that white and sometimes even a faint baby blue color to the female's eyes. Males have orange or red eyes, so telling them apart is very easy to do, a male or a female. Now, what's interesting and very topical for how everybody is living in quarantine and staying inside, the mother hornbill, the mother rhinoceros hornbill, has a similar type of experience that we've been going through the last, since about mid-March. They are cavity nesters, so they look for, obviously a bird this size, you need a really big tree that has a really big hole in it. So they find a suitable cavity, and then the female will lay her eggs. And then the male will seal her in with mud and food, regurgitated food, and then just leaving a very tiny little slit. And then she sits in there for about a month and a half to let the eggs incubate. And then once the eggs hatch, then she will use that beak and part of that horn and smash out the hole. And then she will leave the nest and then seal it back up. And then the two parents will leave a small little hole in the entrance to the nest, and then they will feed the babies. But she's in there for the incubation, which is a month and a half, and then she's with them at the very beginning because they're born, they can't see, they have no feathers, so they're pretty helpless. Usually they lay 1 to 2 eggs. So it's very integral that she's part of the first few weeks. It's actually about another month and a half. So in total, she has to spend almost up to 3 months sitting in that nest between incubating the eggs and then caring for the very young ones until they grow up enough to stand on their own and be fed. And then also, once they're that big, just the father can't support feeding the mom and 2 little ones. So then parenting becomes a 2-bird job in terms of feeding them. So then she'll bust out, reseal it, and then it's another about month until the babies will fledge, and then they will use their little beaks to pound out a hole. The parents will help them, and then they'll hang out with their parents for up to about 6 months. So they can, mother hornbills can relate to living in isolation and being kind of quarantined. Obviously, it's a little different than what we're going through, but living in a hole in a tree for almost up to 3 months and just relying on your spouse or the male hornbill to come and feed you, that is an interesting way to survive in the rainforest. And with that long beak, you can see how she uses her beak like a pair of tweezers. She does have a tongue, but it's very short, so she doesn't use her tongue at all and to help her eat. She just uses her beak. She, like tweezers, picks up a piece of food and then swallows it. An important ecological role that hornbills play is that they are kind of the dispersers of seeds throughout the rainforest. They eat a variety of fruits. They'll also eat the occasional insect, lizard, small mammal, but most of their diet is fruit. And they'll ingest the seed as well. The seed will pass through their body. They can't digest the seed, so then as they're flying around foraging, the seed comes out the other end in a little fertilizer packet. So the trees benefit by creating good tasting fruit so that the hornbill will eat it, and then the hornbill benefits because it gets a meal, and then in flying around the tree benefits once again by just having its seeds dispersed by the hornbill just doing what it does, flying around and going to the bathroom.
You ready for some questions?
Yeah, so we'll field some questions here.
All right, Elliot wants to know, what are you feeding her right now?
So when I started off at the very beginning, I was feeding her her pelleted diet, which is called soft bill. It's kind of like total cereal for birds. It has a wide variety of nutrients and vitamins in there. Also, I'm giving her a range of fruit. She really loves, that's papaya that she loves. I just gave her a grape. For her protein, she gets some egg. And then she also gets some banana. So papaya, egg, grape, banana and sometimes she'll get kiwi. Today she got papaya. Tomorrow she'll probably get some kiwi as a softer fruit.
Marlena wants to know, what is her favorite food? Does she have a favorite?
She definitely does. I think bananas are her favorite. She's also kind of picky because we have to make sure that the papaya is just the right tenderness. If it's too hard, she won't eat it. And then if it's too soft, well, she goes to pick it up and it just falls apart. Grapes and bananas, they usually hold together pretty good. But the kiwi and the papaya, we've learned over time Terri's preferred texture to those fruits. But her favorites are definitely, I think, bananas.
Penelope wants to know, do they have predators in the wild?
That's a great question. They do. Where they would live, obviously being way up on the tops of the canopy, there aren't too many predators. But if like a snake got into their nest, if the hole was too big, or if they were in the process in between sealing it up, a snake could get in there and get the young. There's also large birds of prey, like eagles, that would go after them. And then if they were foraging on the ground, they would have to worry about feline predators as well.
Maddie wants to know, how heavy is she?
That's a good question. So birds are deceptively very lightweight. You might be surprised to know that Terri only weighs just under 5 pounds. So that, once again, the casque is hollow. Birds' beaks by nature are very lightweight. Their bone structure is basically hollow, and there are a lot of feathers. So there's really not much to a bird at all.
Kelly asks, how big is their nest?
How big is their nest? Well, you don't want that egg? Okay. Well, imagine a barrel, like a bourbon barrel, or even one of those trash cans over there. That's roughly the size. If you can picture kind of if you've ever been on a bourbon tour, a standard, about 3/4 of that size of a standard barrel of bourbon is about the size of the cavity that they need. Of course, they'll seal in that hole, and the hole that they hop into is small. It doesn't have to be that big, but the size of the cavity is about 3/4 the size of a bourbon barrel.
Sophie wondered how large her wingspan is.
So yeah, her wingspan, it's about 3 feet. It's about 3.5 feet.
And Sasha asked, does she have eyelashes?
So it does look like she has eyelashes. Hornbills have modified feathers that are around their eyes. So it protects their eyes. So for rhinoceros hornbills, when you're foraging in the rainforest, so she's offering me food instead of she eating it. She's trying to feed me. So they're modified eyelashes to just, or modified feathers to act like eyelashes. So when you're foraging and pushing aside brush, it protects their eyes. Other hornbills that live in like grasslands, it protects their eyes in dust storms. So just like our eyelashes, except they're actually very tiny little feathers.
McKenna wants to know if they're endangered.
So they are considered threatened. So they're not, they are on the spectrum of, they're not endangered or critically endangered, they're one step above endangered and they're threatened. And unfortunately their numbers are declining. They don't know exactly how many pairs are out there or how many adults, but when you consider that they need undisturbed rainforest, so secondary rainforest that's come back. The trees aren't big enough, so they need primary rainforest, and that habitat unfortunately is shrinking where they live. And they just need space and they need those trees, so their numbers are decreasing and they're considered vulnerable.
Rose wondered, are you able to hold her?
Yep, so I'll just show you how we just ask her to hop up like that, and then she just hops on the arm. So yeah, and her feet, she doesn't have claws like a raptor. Those nails don't hurt at all. Her feet are just used for hanging on like she was the branch or my arm, whereas a raptor like a hawk or an eagle would use their feet for grasping on the prey, but Terri doesn't use her feet that way. But yeah, she'll just sit on my arm.
And Jocelyn wanted to know, is she able to fly?
She is. Yeah, she flies in our summer encounter, and unfortunately today we had to scramble to find an inside place. She does fly indoors from perch to perch, so she's actually a really good flyer. She's developed pretty good flight skills over the last few years.
Bright wants to know, how long can they live?
That is an excellent question. So in the wild, usually about 25 years, but here at the zoo, we hope that she'll live at least around 35 years.
And Kirk wants to know, can she sing?
Can she sing? So we're going to try something. She actually does more of a honk, and sometimes if we sing really loud, then she will start honking. So at the risk of embarrassing myself, we'll give this a try and see if she'll honk with my singing. So are you ready, Terri? Here we go. All right, clean up your beak. Yep. Whoa, 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 whoa. So,
That's
yep,
awesome.
that's their casque in action. So that's how I get them to call, I guess.
Maeve wants to know, is she sharpening her beak?
So no, she's cleaning her beak. So when I gave her those bananas or some of the, like the papaya, sometimes it gets, the juices get on the tip of her beak. So then she just uses the perch to kind of clean off her beak, because obviously she didn't have hands to wipe her face like we would. So birds use their perching to kind of clean their beak.
Elsie wants to know, how long have you been her handler?
So there's four of us that work with Terri currently, and I've known Terri. She came to the bird encounter from the birdhouse, I think back in 2006 or 2007. So I've known her since then. And there's a group, all four of us. She's pretty good with all four of us. She's actually, we can't figure out if she really likes or is very interested in Angela, one of our trainers. But she's taken to all the trainers that are with us right now.
Corey wants to know if they're able to swim.
Swim. Well, because bird bones are hollow, they kind of float anyway, and with that task, it's kind of, I guess, like a life preserver on top of her head. But where they're found, they wouldn't do too much swimming because they'd be up in a tree, so there wouldn't be a need to go swimming. And once they would get waterlogged, then they would have a really hard time flying. So in terms of swimming like a penguin or a duck, no, but I don't think she would drown per se. She would probably just float at the top, because birds, all those hollow bones and that hollow casque would help it float.
Layla would like to know if she would make a good pet.
No, she would not. She's very, very messy. She would need a huge space to be able to fly around in for exercise and room to move. And then you heard how loud she can be. So birds, in general, birds communicate by vocalizing, which makes birds like Terri or even household parrots very challenging, because they're very noisy. So I would not recommend one as a pet. They're messy. Birds go to the bathroom a lot. She went a little bit when we got here, and they go to the bathroom about every 20 minutes. So over the course of the day, that tends to pile up. So not recommended for pets.
Our last question is from Molly, and she wants to know, do they live a solitary life or do they live in groups?
That's another good question. So they are monogamous, which means they mate for life. Obviously, if something happens to a mate, then they'll find another one. So they'll live as a pair. When the juveniles are, like I said earlier, up to about 6 months old, they'll live kind of as a little family unit until the parents will kind of encourage the young ones to get out on their own, and because it'll be time to start the ritual of another clutch, another year of chicks. Juveniles, so they don't reach maturity until they're about 5 or 6 years old. So there's sometimes groups of juveniles that hang out, just like people. Juveniles tend to hang out together. So they're not solitary, but they're not in huge flocks like a parrot. So they'll live together as partners, but also as juveniles, and they'll live together. So before we head off, I want to thank you again for joining us today. And there is a neat activity you can do. You can click on the link and see how it's done on the YouTube link there of you can make Terri finger puppets. And it's actually very fitting because the finger puppets look a lot like her beak. So it's an activity very befitting of Terri. So
and one other thing before you close off. Susie says that the donations spiked up when you were singing. So can you end us with her singing again?
I sure can. Anything, if Susie says it's true, then I'll believe it. All right, Terri, let's get to singing again. Here we go. Whoa!